Hello and welcome to House to Home, a weekly podcast produced by Family Policy Alliance Foundation. My name is Joseph Kohm. I'm the Vice President of Policy here at Family Policy Alliance Foundation, and I'm one of the regular co-hosts of House to Home. Today we have a really special guest with us, the great senator from the great state of South Carolina, Tim Scott, joining us in his capacity as chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, one of the great friends of Family Policy Alliance and the social conservative movement. Chairman Scott, thank you for joining us today. We're so honored to have you on House to Home.
Well, thank you so much, Joseph. It's good to be with you. Thank you for doing the program itself. The podcast is fantastic. And frankly, everyone deserves more than a house. They actually do deserve a home. So I love the title. I love what you stand for. And may the Lord continue to bless and keep this really important resource for our country.
Thank you for your kindness, Chairman Scott. I mean, that's why we're so excited to talk to you about housing itself, because the name of the show is House to Home.
Yes, sir.
Before I get into the questions, I just want to thank you for the friend you've been to FPA over the years, particularly in the original social conservative conference that we hosted in the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, yes.
You were one of our great speakers at that event, and without you, SoCon would not be the premier gathering of social conservatives every summer that it is today. So thank you for believing in us back then. But I do want to talk to you about housing, because you've got this great bill that's garnered a lot of support on Capitol Hill. So to get into that, I know you are very open about your own family's struggles with housing growing up. And I just want to know how that personal experience and your personal faith that you're so well known for inspired you to put together this family-friendly piece of legislation like the Renewing Opportunity in the American Dream, or Road to Housing Act. How did it inform your work on the Road Act?
You know, growing up in poverty in a single-parent household really did inform and educate. And frankly, I think it framed my worldview in so many powerful ways. Number one, when my parents got divorced, we moved into a small home, 700 square feet. My grandparents were renting the place. I had to share a bedroom and a bed with my mom, my brother. We all shared the same bed and bedroom for a couple of years. I got to say that when you're poor, there's something transient in poverty. We moved 4 different elementary schools by the 4th grade, so it had a powerful impact on my worldview. Scarcity also played a significant role in that process. I will say, however, that my mother and my grandmother's faith taught me so much about why we should be optimistic that with God, all things are possible. Philippians 4:19 reminds us that but God will meet all of our needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. And when you're living in poverty, it doesn't feel like the right verse, but my mom taught me that if all things are possible, the more you understand the gospel of Jesus Christ, the more it will manifest in your life. It's not to suggest that there's a get-rich-quick scheme in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but Philippians 4:11 reminds us that we can find contentment in all of our circumstances because we know whose we are. And that was a powerful force. And as a legislator, I got to say, Joseph, that framework does help steady me during the hardest times, especially when you're writing complicated legislation that will hopefully set captives free to understand and appreciate the beauty of the American dream. And so I'm excited that the mess that was my young life created a message on the process, allowing me to be a messenger for the Lord, a messenger that hopefully provides hope and opportunity for people going through hard times. The good news is we live in the greatest country on the planet. All things are possible. And with good legislation, strong regulation, I'm very optimistic and bullish that more homeowners will be a reality because of these years in the majority.
Amen. What a great testimony, Chairman Scott. Thank you for sharing it. And I just echo the theme of that, which is God doesn't bless us just for ourselves, but he blesses us to be a blessing to others. And
Amen.
You're using that in your work on Capitol Hill, and particularly in this bill, which is what I want to ask you about next, because the Road Act and your legislation generally has garnered broad popular support on Capitol Hill. Everybody from home builders to bankers to local leaders, they all support the Road Act, and mayors as well. So can you just walk our audience through how the bill works to unlock the supply of housing and expand the American dream and more opportunities for the American people?
Well, Joseph, one of the things that we have to recognize, especially as conservatives, we want legislation that actually improves the plight of the average person, not by giving more things away, but to do conservation. That's what being a conservative is really about from my perspective. And so from that perspective, the question is, how do we eliminate the current rules of the road put in place by previous administrations? How do we make it easier for homeownership to be realized? The regulatory burdens that we face as a nation is over the moon. And so every single time that we create legislation that gets the government out the way, we as conservatives say, that's common sense. The more burdensome the regulatory environment is, the harder it is for people to achieve their dream, especially of home ownership. And so what the legislation does is it makes it easier for us by eliminating the federal red tape, the state red tape, and some of the local red tape. It makes it easier for home ownership to be affordable. And we also want to find ways to unlock billions of dollars of capital for those who are credit worthy. Our legislation never makes it easier for people to rent their own home, as we saw during the crisis in 2007, 2008. We want homeowners who are responsible, credit worthy, and prepared. So the legislation addresses it from both ends, from the red tape end and from the local capacity that's necessary to have home ownership achieved by the American individual.
Oh, that's terrific. I mean, we want to see the American family restored and renewed at
Yes.
FPA and across the social conservative movement. And one of those barriers is housing. It's a prerequisite.
Yes.
You can't have 5 kids if you don't have at least a couple of bedrooms. So this is just
Exactly,
terrific.
Joseph.
And we're big fans of the Road Act. So the last question I have for you, Senator Scott, or Chairman Scott, is just, you've said that this bill is not just about making a point, but you're clear that this is going to make an actual difference in this challenge and this opportunity for American families. Give us the vision for what success looks like. Like, what do you envision the positive impact being? What does success look like 5, 10 years down the road if the Road to Housing Act becomes law?
Well, Joseph, thank you for that. You and I both probably are fans of Proverbs 29:18, that without a vision, people perish. A really important way of looking at the future. So when I look out 10 years from now, I see more people celebrating the equity that has been earned through home ownership. Sometimes the liberals talk about equity as if you can just wave a wand and it happens. We as conservatives know that it has to be earned over time. And so my vision for America is that 10 years from now, more Americans have earn equity position in America through home ownership. I look at all the percentages of who homeowners are and who they are not. And so I want to see those percentages going up in every demographic, every cohort of the American people. I'm excited to see the time when we see more Americans having a true stake in this country. And so my vision is, number one, more Americans own their homes. Number two, the wealth gap continues to reduce or decrease between all the cohorts because more Americans are owning their homes. And number three, that we celebrate the conservative approach to making things better. Under President Trump, we've been on a brisk pace, to say it kindly. I hope that it continues for the next few years and that Americans all across the country get to celebrate walking in, not to a house, not to an apartment, but into their home, where loving families, the strongest single unit in our country is the family. More families celebrate owning their own homes.
Well, I couldn't agree more. What a wonderful, persuasive vision. It's both biblical and it's conservative. Chairman Scott, thank you for your work on it. We are of one mind with you and sharing in this vision, and we're proud to support you and the Road Act. So I just thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for being on House to Home. We're so honored to host you. To our audience, we're going to be back in a few minutes with more on the Road Act, but we want to thank Chairman Scott for his time. Thank you for joining us, Chairman.
Thank you all very much. God bless.
Welcome back to House to Home. This is part 2 of our episode on the Road to Housing Act, sponsored by Chairman Tim Scott, the Senate Banking Committee. We just heard from the chairman. What a great man and a great warrior for social conservatism and for biblical values on Capitol Hill today. We're thankful once again to the chairman for taking time out of his busy schedule at the time during a government shutdown when we were recording to make time for House to Home and for all of you who are listening to talk about the Road Act. So we're back from the break, and I have another guest with me as usual. Grace is out this week, but I have FPA's Vice President of Government Affairs, Dylan Jeremiah, who's been on the show before. He's our resident representative in DC for Family Policy Alliance Foundation. He represents all of you and your support there. So, Dylan, welcome back to the show. How good was the chairman coming on and talking to us?
Oh, Joseph, that was absolutely awesome to hear from Chairman Scott. And I thought you did an excellent job interviewing him. So neat to hear where he came from, how that's affected his worldview and his vision for this piece of housing legislation. So neat. And so just titillating that it's all rooted in his faith.
Yeah, well said. What a great modern example of what right looks like, I think, as a Christian and a public servant, someone engaged in the civic process. His testimony is driving his actual policy, not just the words he says. So just really inspiring and should be encouraging, I think, for all of us. Dylan, we have you on for just a few more minutes to finish out the show with our last segment here. Chairman Scott gave us a good overview of how the Road to Housing Act works, but you're the one representing all of us there in DC and working with these offices and our national allied organizations on the nuts and bolts of these policies. So maybe you could just explain to our audience a little bit more of exactly how the Road to Housing works and why we at FPA at least think it's a great piece of legislation.
Yeah, of course. So I'll say to start that it's a very large legislative package. There were a whole lot of different ideas within the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. And so this is a beautiful conglomeration of a lot of awesome ideas. So you'll see a whole lot of senators speaking about different pieces of legislation that they've gotten into this package. But I'd say that there's three main core strategies that it tries to address. So there are incentives and technical assistance for local governments. So you can think of like carrot and stick type mechanisms to encourage cities and towns to reform some of their zoning codes, to assist in constraining to assist in trying to reform some of those regulations that artificially constrain housing supply. And then there's federal regulatory reform as well. So trying to make it easier for businesses that do modular houses, manufactured homes to bring down housing prices for folks, and then also cutting Section 8 hurdles that discourage landlord participation. So bringing more money into the housing space and then making that money go a little bit further. So stretching the dollar, so to speak. And then there's also some financing and funding reforms that get really, really into the weeds around mortgage rules and higher FHA loan limits for different, on-site dwellings. And then as well, manufactured homes, modular homes, all of that. And then also some flexibility with regards to public housing. So should be more sustainable for folks that are transitioning out of public housing and into, like Senator and Chairman Tim Scott said, moving into an actual home and not just a house or an apartment.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, it is a very nuts and bolts bill. It's a deregulatory bill, and the thing about regulation is that it's usually not very cool, in people's minds, and not just in its effects, but in the way it functions. Like, this is why you're on the Hill for us, Dylan, because you understand all this stuff. So our audience only has to think about the great vision that this bill is going to lead to of housing unlocked for millions of families. But I feel like that's so often the biblical way is to get to the glorious vision that God has. You have to wade through some less exciting things and do the really hard work that's not as fun to get there. But that's why, as the chairman said, the Bible says to write down the vision, because that written down vision brings restraint. That's what the bill is envisioning. And that's what guides you through that discipline to get through that more drudgery work to get to what really matters. And that's why we're just glad to bring attention to this. And it does strike me, Dylan, just love to know if you have any thoughts on this, as there are two competing narratives about solving the housing crisis. At the time of recording, we're maybe about 2 weeks away from November elections in some places across the country, including the mayorship of New York. And people are really talking about Zohran Mamdani, the official Democrat candidate there, who has a lot of his own ideas about solving the housing problem in New York. And they want to use things like rent control and lots of even more government regulation on housing. So do you see this, Dylan, as like two competing ideas of solving the very real housing crisis for families? And somebody's ideas are going to win out one way or other, either Chairman Scott's deregulatory approach or the new wave Democrat model of we need even more regulation and top-down control from the government.
Yeah, no, that's spot on, Joseph. And I'm glad that you brought it up. I think it is interesting and can't be just brushed to the side that housing is a very, very popular issue. So whether you're coming at it from the left or the right, this is something that is near and dear to people's hearts. And I think if you were to poll the average American, they would say, yes, this is a problem. On many different policy issues, we often, can rub against our friends on the other side of the aisle who say, oh, we don't think it's a problem. But it seems like with housing, everyone can agree that this is getting a little bit out of hand. And for the next generation and generations to come, this is certainly something that needs to be combated. But to answer your more original question, yes, I think that you're spot on. There are certainly two competing visions. One, which is, we need to buy up all this property and then make it habitable for these people. And that's how we solve the housing crisis. So, there's that vision and Chairman Scott's vision as well to try and assist people where they can grow to be able to have, like he said, equity in this country and then equity in their home. And by deregulating, we can bring down those prices so people that can then be able to earn this type of this type of dwelling, whether it be a home, an apartment, what have you. And so, yes, certainly two competing visions. I certainly hope that Chairman Scott's will win out. And I'm very excited to see what's to come. But it is interesting with housing. There's not necessarily, it's not as simple as the normal right and left, very linear spectrum. You have lots of different warring factions, people that, maybe don't want multi-housing units in their neighborhood where they, live on half-acre lots in a, nice, shady neighborhood. And then you have folks that say, yes, we need to have apartments everywhere all the time. And they maybe live in a more rural area or maybe a more urban area. So it's been really neat to see this. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is going to be the first housing bill in 15 years that has a really solid chance to pass. So not only is this amazing legislation, but this is pretty historic too. And that this is, and I think part of that problem, is that we haven't addressed this for a long period of time, and we've begun to reap some of these results where young folks just aren't able to purchase a home. People are stuck in apartments. And like you mentioned a little bit earlier, and like the chairman mentioned earlier too, it's tough to grow a family when you've got, like Chairman Scott mentioned, 700 square feet to work with, or you're in a studio apartment. It's easier to do that if you have multiple bedrooms and, maybe you've got a yard for your kids to play in and they don't have to, cross over a highway or over a busy street to go get to the park to just have a swing. To enjoy their afternoon after school or something.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I do find that historic nature of this a little bit shocking, just because this housing crisis is not anything new. Going back to even the financial crisis, of the early 2000s, when you and I were still growing up, Dylan, the fact that we haven't had a serious housing bill since approximately that time, or a little bit after, is really a sign of unresponsiveness to the American people's desires and polling by our leaders, because I think it should be a huge encouragement to our audience that people across the aisle, they disagree on the solutions to this, but they do agree that it's a problem. And I think that represents a huge opportunity to us. Like there are some things that are bipartisan and are kind of stupid, like they really shouldn't be. Like at the time of recording, the mainstream media is trying to gin up a controversy over President Trump's renovations of this tiny portion of the East Wing of the White House, right? Like that's kind of stupid. All right, White House renovations have happened throughout the entire White House's existence. But this is something that actually is important and is bipartisan and is getting attention, this housing crisis. It's an opportunity for us, and it's a prerequisite to families, like the chairman and I talked about. Charlie Kirk said that his highest ambition and vision for his whole life and for Turning Point was to renew the American family. I think this is a necessary prerequisite to that. We cannot fulfill that vision if we don't do this through the Road Act, through more deregulation to unlock that supply. So Dylan, maybe before as we wrap up this episode, just let us know, because you're the expert there on the Hill. Where's the Road Act at in the process of becoming law, and what should people expect to happen next in regards to that process?
Certainly. So yes, it is a bit tough to follow, but like I mentioned, the Road to Housing Act is indeed a legislative package of its own. And then in typical congressional fashion, it's been put into a larger legislative package that deals with some funding for different parts of the government. So it is currently in the second manager's package within the NDAA. So all that to say, there's a big legislative vehicle. This has now been added to that legislative vehicle. And so where it is currently, the Senate has passed it. And so now what needs to happen is the House and the Senate come together in conference. So they're going to hash out some of the differences between what the House passed and what the Senate passed. So you'll have House leadership and Senate leadership on both sides of the aisle trying to figure out the best way to maybe pull some things, tweak some things to make them all fit so that both chambers are happy. So that's where it currently is. So we are just about at the finish line. So now it's just about dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and figuring out the very best way to get this larger legislative vehicle passed into law so that this can all come into effect.
Sounds really exciting, Dylan. Sounds like we're actually fairly close. I mean, most legislation never gets this far by any stretch. Versions of this have received floor votes in both chambers, correct?
That's right. So,
Awesome.
This is just about at the finish line here. We are almost there. It's certainly been a tough hurdle. The Senate has their filibuster rule, so 60 votes have to be cast to pass a bill. And so it is really, really exciting that there's so much bipartisan support for this. And it's very thrilling in a time that's so divisive that folks can still come together and say, hey, this is really needed for this country. This has to be addressed, and we're willing to get creative on how to do that.
Boy, that's great. I mean, it's really exciting and hopeful news. I want to tell our audience we will bring you updates on the Road Act as they come, which means you can partner with us by praying for this act and by the people hashing this out. So Speaker Johnson, Senate Majority Leader Thune in his office, and you can pray for President Trump to be prepared to sign this, hopefully, when a version of it gets to his desk. We'll bring you all those updates as they come, and we'll probably do another show on it once it gets signed into law, fingers crossed. But Dylan, what else can people pray for in this process and follow along with?
Yeah, certainly. I would say, stay involved, continue to follow the news with regards to what's going on in the halls of Congress. I would say as well, just, continue to pray for leaders to find an end to this government shutdown. It's certainly affecting a lot of people in this area. And so, we're hoping to get the government back rolling again so we can continue to push on our social conservative agenda, continue to advance the movement and advance the kingdom of God. So we're really excited for that. So continue to keep that in your prayers. It would be great to have a solution here quickly so that this can truly get rolling again.
Yeah, particularly about the government shutdown. We're hoping this can be one of the first pieces of business they deal with after the shutdown. But the time of recording, we got to get through the shutdown first to get there. So good prayer request there, Dylan. And I can just conclude by telling our audience that Chairman Scott is one of, I think, the few members on the Hill that I can for sure confidently say he cares about and yearns for your prayers. So you can pray for him as the main shepherd for this legislation. He's done such a good job that I think everybody saw earlier in the show, and he's going to continue to. So Dylan, thank you for joining me for the second segment of this great episode on the housing issue and on the Road Act specifically. Thanks for the great job you do on the Hill representing all of our listeners and their social conservative biblical values on the Hill. And thanks to our audience for listening. Grace will be back with me for our next episode. But I've been Joseph Kohm, the Vice President of Policy at Family Policy Alliance, with first the great man, Senator Tim Scott, Chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and now Dylan Jeremiah, FPA's Vice President of Government Affairs on the Hill. This is a special episode of House to Home, obviously, but we're usually a weekly podcast. So if you like this kind of content and you like this kind of news and updates and interpretation, give us a follow on Spotify or subscribe on Apple Pods or on YouTube. We covet your support and we're grateful for it. We'll be back soon with another episode of House to Home. Take care.